Welcome. Today's journey takes us somewhere most people never look, inside the mind itself, to the voice that never stops talking. You have heard it your whole life, but do you actually know what it is? Let's find out. All aboard! Right now, as you're watching this, there is a voice in your head reading these words. Perhaps it sounds calm, perhaps it is quiet and steady, or perhaps it is already asking questions. Now, here is something that will stay with you. Some people don't have that voice. No internal monologue, no narrator, no running commentary, just silence. And they are completely, entirely normal. Which raises a question that most people never think to ask. What actually is that voice? Where did it come from? And is it even you? That is what we are here to find. Let us be precise about what we are actually discussing. Your inner voice is not some mystical phenomenon. It is not your soul speaking. It is not a ghost in the machine. It is your brain talking to itself. When you think in words, planning your day, replaying a conversation, reading quietly to yourself, your brain fires the exact same signals it uses for actual speech. Same regions, same pathways, same machinery. Simply without moving your mouth. Scientists call this inner speech, and the region of the brain responsible for it is called Broca's area, named after a French surgeon, Paul Broca, who in 1861 discovered something remarkable. Patients with damage to this precise region lost the ability to speak. Not to understand language, not to think, to speak. And that same region, the one Broca identified over 160 years ago, is active right now. While you watch this, while you listen, quietly converting your thoughts into something that feels like a voice. Consider what that means. The voice you experience as your own private inner world is a biological process, measurable, mappable, real. And that, I would argue, makes it far more extraordinary, not less. We established that some people do not have an inner voice, and I suspect, right now, part of you is wondering, do I actually have one? You are listening for it, which is, of course, somewhat amusing, because the act of listening for it is the voice. The condition has a name, Anendophasia. Anendophasia. Researchers at the University of Copenhagen found that somewhere between 5 and 10% of people experience this. Roughly 1 in 15 people you know has never heard a voice in their head. They still think, they still plan, they still feel. They simply do it differently. More in images, in feelings, in abstract concepts that carry no words. Imagine trying to explain that to someone whose mind never stops talking. It is like describing color to someone who has never seen it. Now consider this. Imagine you are about to have a difficult conversation. Your employer, perhaps. A friend with whom something has gone wrong. Most people with an inner voice, will rehearse that conversation beforehand. I will say this, they will likely respond with that. And then I will say, the voice runs the simulation, prepares the ground. Now imagine you do not have that. No rehearsal dialogue, no words to arrange in advance. Simply a felt sense of what you wish to communicate. And here is what the research shows. Those people often do not struggle more in that conversation. They simply arrived there by a different road. There are real differences, of course. Verbal memory, holding words in your mind for even a short time, that is considerably harder without the inner voice acting as a rehearsal loop. And then there is this. something that genuinely gave me pause when I first encountered it. People without inner speech tend to experience lower levels of self-critical rumination. That voice in your head that replays your worst moments at 2 in the morning. Some people simply do not have that. Not because they are more evolved, not because they have meditated for 20 years, simply because their brain took a different path. Some minds speak, some picture, some simply know. None is more human than the other. Where did this voice actually come from? Because here is what most people assume. They assume the inner voice has always been there, that it is simply part of being human. But what if that assumption is wrong? What if the voice you experience as your own thoughts, the thing you call your inner world, is actually a relatively recent invention? Let us go back, way back. 100,000 years ago, early humans, Africa. They communicate, they cooperate, they survive. But Broca's area, the region we now associate with speech, was not originally built for speech at all. It was built for hands, specifically for processing and understanding hand gestures, pointing, signaling, showing. That was the original language. Then, slowly, over tens of thousands of years, vocal communication took over. And the brain did something I find genuinely remarkable. It did not build a new system from scratch. It simply repurposed the old one. The region that once tracked hand movements began processing words instead, first spoken aloud, then, eventually, internally. So your inner voice evolved from gestures. From your ancestors pointing at things around a fire 100,000 years ago. That is the machinery running in your head right now. And then there is the theory that I find most difficult to set aside. Proposed by a psychologist named Julian Jaynes in 1976. His book, The Origin of Consciousness in the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind. His argument is this, that as recently as 3,000 years ago, not 1,000,000, not 100,000, 3,000, human beings did not possess what we would recognize as self-aware, introspective consciousness. Instead, the two hemispheres of the brain operated in separation. One hemisphere would generate commands, the other would receive them and interpret them as external voices, the voices of gods, of ancestors, of divine beings speaking from beyond. This is why, Jaynes argued, ancient literature is filled with people hearing gods speak directly to them. In the Iliad, characters receive commands from the gods in the midst of battle. Jaynes was not suggesting they were being poetic. He believed they were being literal. Those voices they heard were themselves. They simply did not know it yet. Now, this theory is contested. Many researchers push back on it. It is difficult to prove, difficult to disprove, and yet it raises a question I find myself returning to. If the inner voice is something that developed, something that evolved, what does that tell us about who we are? Is the voice you hear right now something ancient and fundamental, or is it simply the latest update in a brain that is still figuring itself out? So now we know what the inner voice is, we know where it came from. But here is the question that actually matters for your daily life. What is it doing? Because it is not simply background noise. It is not a radio left on in an empty room. It is, in many ways, the engine behind how you function. Consider this. The last time you were about to do something you knew you probably should not. Perhaps eat something you would regret. Perhaps send a message written in a moment of anger. Perhaps skip something important for the 3rd time that week. And something inside you said, "Don't, you will regret this." That was your inner voice acting as a brake. Research shows that people who find ways to suppress their inner voice become measurably more impulsive, more likely to make decisions they later wish they had not made. The voice is not just talking, It is helping you govern yourself. Now here is something that I will admit caught me off guard when I first encountered it. There is a technique studied extensively by psychologist Ethan Kross at the University of Michigan involving a remarkably simple shift in how you speak to yourself. Instead of saying, "I am nervous about this," "I am not good enough for this," "I cannot do this," you use your own name. Sam is nervous about this. Sam is not sure he can do this. Third person, your own name, as if you were advising someone else. And the results are consistent. This single shift creates what researchers call cognitive distancing, the ability to observe your own experience from the outside, to become, in effect, your own advisor, rather than your own prosecutor. And then there is planning. Think about how you organize your day inside your head, how you rehearse a conversation before it happens, how you replay something that went wrong, turning it over, looking for what you might do differently. That is the voice, running simulations, building scenarios, processing experience into understanding. When people reflect on the past, analyze their own feelings, or simply allow their minds to wander, the brain's language centers activate. The inner voice is not separate from thinking. In many ways, it is thinking. At least for most of us. But here's the part that deserves its own conversation. The same voice that plans for you, that protects you, that helps you prepare, is also the voice that speaks at 3 in the morning, that will not stop, that will not let go, that tells you things you would never say to someone you love. And that is where we are going next. Consider something for a moment. The same voice that helps you plan your day, that rehearses your conversations, that keeps you from making decisions you would regret. That voice is also the one that wakes you at 3 in the morning to remind you of something embarrassing you said 7 years ago. It is, to put it plainly, not always your friend. Research is consistent on this point. A repetitive critical inner voice is directly linked to depression, anxiety, and excessive rumination. And what is rumination precisely? It is the mind running the same thought in a loop, over and over. Not to solve anything, not to reach any conclusion, simply repeating. Chronic stress increases rumination, repeatedly focusing on negative thoughts, keeping the brain locked in a cycle it cannot easily escape. The voice was designed to process threats, to scan the environment, to protect you. The problem is, it cannot always distinguish between a real threat and a memory, between something happening now and something that happened 10 years ago. So it treats both the same way, with full alarm, full intensity, full volume. And here is what makes it particularly difficult to manage. People experiencing depression and anxiety frequently report that their inner voice is incessant, relentless, overwhelmingly critical. The voice does not simply comment. It judges, it condemns, it catastrophizes. I made one mistake, everything is ruined. They have not responded, they must be angry. I am not good enough, I never have been. When the inner voice speaks this way, your brain reacts as though you are under physical threat. Cortisol rises. The amygdala, your brain's fear center, activates. The prefrontal cortex, which handles rational thought, begins to disengage. The more the critical voice speaks, the harder it becomes to think clearly. The harder it becomes to stop it. It is a loop that feeds itself. And yet, what I find most worth understanding is this. That voice, the one attacking you, genuinely believes it is helping. It evolved as a threat detector, a survival mechanism built over millions of years. It speaks in your voice. It uses your memories. It knows precisely which concerns carry the most weight. But it is not malicious. It is simply misfiring. applying ancient survival software to modern emotional problems it was never designed to handle. And yet, the fact that this voice is a mechanism, not a truth, not your identity, not a verdict on who you are, means it can be changed. And that is precisely what we need to discuss next. The voice, as we have established, is not going anywhere. It is built into the architecture of your brain. It will speak whether you invite it to or not. The question, then, is not how to silence it. The question is how to change what it says. And, this matters, the science says you can. The first tool is one you have likely encountered before: meditation. Not as a spiritual practice, not as a lifestyle choice, as a neurological one. Mindfulness practice has been shown to induce neuroplasticity, literally altering the physical structure of the brain. It reduces the reactivity of the amygdala, improves emotional regulation, builds genuine resilience to stress. What this means in practice is more straightforward than it sounds. When you observe the voice without reacting to it, when you notice, there is a thought, rather than, this thought is true, you are training the brain to create distance between the stimulus and the response. The voice speaks, and instead of becoming the voice, you watch it. The thought passes, as thoughts do. The second tool is one we touched on earlier: third-person self-talk, referring to yourself by name rather than by I. Sam is feeling overwhelmed right now, rather than I am overwhelmed. It sounds, I will admit, almost absurdly simple, and yet the research is consistent. This single shift creates what psychologists call cognitive distancing, the ability to observe your own experience from a slight remove. You become, in effect, your own advisor, rather than your own prosecutor. The third tool is perhaps the most direct. Name the voice. Not metaphorically, literally give it a name. Some people call their inner critic the committee. Others give it a specific name entirely. When the critical voice speaks, you respond not with argument, not with resistance, but with simple acknowledgement. Ah, there you are again. Research in cognitive behavioral therapy shows that this act of naming reduces the emotional charge of the thought significantly. The voice is not malicious. It is a misfiring mechanism, and mechanisms can be retrained. But perhaps the most profound shift of all is simply this: recognizing that the voice is not you. It is a mechanism, a very old, very persistent mechanism that evolved long before you were born. It speaks in your voice. It uses your memories. It knows exactly which concerns carry the most weight, but it is not the final word on who you are. It never was. So, let us return to where we began. That voice in your head, the one that has been listening to all of this, perhaps commenting on it, perhaps questioning it. Where did it come from? It came from your ancestors, from gestures around a fire, from a brain that repurposed old machinery to do something entirely new. It came from millions of years of evolution that had no idea it was building something you would one day call yourself. And yet here it is, planning, protecting, judging, remembering, running its quiet commentary on everything you do. Half the people on this planet have a voice that never stops talking. The other half move through the world in a different kind of silence, thinking in images, in feelings, in things without names. Neither is broken. Neither is more human than the other. They are simply different versions of the same remarkable machine. What is worth considering and I leave you with this, is that for most of human history, people believed that voice was something external. A god, an ancestor, a spirit speaking from beyond. Something outside themselves, reaching in. It took thousands of years to understand that the voice was theirs all along. That the thing they were listening to was themselves. And perhaps the most important question is not where the voice came from, but what you choose to do with what it says. That is all for today. I am Professor Hoot, and I will see you next time.